Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope you're doing well. I recently came across a news article on the online newspaper called The Western Standard. The Western Standard is a right-wing, conservative, anti-Muslim, anti-Islam newspaper which is based in, surprise, surprise, Alberta, Canada. It was founded by Ezra Levant. Many of you would know who Ezra Levant is. He's a very, very staunch Zionist, very pro-Israel, very anti-Palestine, and very anti-Islam, anti-Muslim, and anti-immigrant in general. The Western Standard newspaper is now owned and operated by Derek Fildebrandt. I'm not Canadian enough to know how to pronounce that name properly. And on January 28, 2025, the Western Standard ran this news piece. The headline read, "Notorious UK activist who said Muslims must fight Jews, Christians to headline upcoming Islamic conference in Ontario." This is in reference to Mohammed Hijab, who is a very well-known Muslim speaker, debater, researcher, and he will be headlining the I3 conference in Burlington, Ontario, here in Canada on February 24th, 2025. So ahead of his coming, the anti-Islam, anti-Muslim propaganda machine is starting to turn its wheels, is starting its fear-mongering and its misrepresentation of Mohammed Hijab's views and presenting him as some kind of scary radical or extremist. Now, I want to make the caveat here that you don't have to like Mohammed Hijab. Whether you're a non-Muslim, a Jew, or a Muslim, you don't have to like Mohammed Hijab, but fairness demands that we have to look at what his views actually are, as opposed to what is being wrongly attributed to him. So let's look at the two specific examples, or maybe the three examples of wrong allegations, slanderous allegations that are being made against Mohammed Hijab in this news piece by the Western Standard. So as we scroll down the website, you can see that there was once an embedded video here. Now it says view this post on Instagram, but if you click on that, it just goes to a dead link. Here is that original embedded video that was played on the Western Standard.news and which had been reposted from the account of Israel Now. Israel Now was founded by Meir Weinstein. Meir Weinstein is known to be an extremist Jewish Zionist. His impressive resume includes having been part of the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces. That probably will tell you all that you need to know about him. But in addition to that, he was also the founder of the JDL Canada, which is the Jewish Defense League Canada. The JDL in America was considered so extreme that it's actually considered and officially considered to be a terrorist organization by the government of the US. So Meir Weinstein was the founder of the Canadian wing or the Canadian branch of the JDL. The JDL has been described by the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. In other words, it's been described by another Jewish organization as, quote, an organization that preached a radical form of Jewish nationalism which reflected racism, violence, and political extremism. In addition to that, Meir Weinstein is the spiritual disciple of Meir Kahane. Meir Kahane is another Jewish Zionist extremist who, according to his own words, the name Kahane means terror. Terror, that's what the name means to the Arabs.
It's important that every one of you know what the name Kahane means to the Arabs. It means terror. They're afraid. And that's the only language they understand.
So Meir Weinstein is the disciple of terror, of a man, Meir Kahane, who described his own name Kahane as meaning terror. That's what it means to the Arabs, he said, and he was proud of that. Meir Weinstein's resume continues. His Facebook group was linked to a group called Death to Arabs. However, see, I want to be fair to the other side. So Meir Weinstein claimed that he didn't know that he had subscribed to that group because that group was called Death to Arabs in Hebrew. The name of the group was written in Hebrew, and Meir Weinstein claims that he doesn't know or understand Hebrew.
Right.
And finally, what we can mention about Mir Weinstein is that back in, I don't know if it was the late 80s or early 90s, but the famous Cave of the Patriarchs massacre in Hebron, or the mosque massacre in Hebron, which was carried out by an extremist Jewish settler named Baruch Goldstein, when he walked into the Hebron mosque and he massacred a number of peaceful Muslim worshippers. When that happened, Mir Weinstein from Canada said that he will not condemn Baruch Goldstein, and he refused to condemn Baruch Goldstein for that act of terror in which, he shot innocent Muslim worshippers dead. So anyhow, on Mir Weinstein's Twitter account, or more specifically on the Twitter account of Israel Now, we can still find that original video. In the comments section, you can find that embedded video. So let's have a quick look at that.
Reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. You should fight those empires around you, or those hukumat around you, which are Jew or Christian, until they give the jizya. That's fine. That we already know Islam allows. And then the howness of that is in the hadith. The three options that they're given: either you give the jizya, or you do this, or you do that. We're not apologetic about that point. That is truth. If your religion has to have an expansionist element, so then therefore there is no situation or conceivability of peace being made between Muslims and non-Muslims.
Okay, so I'm not going to attempt to explain everything just for the purposes of time and not making this video too long. But let's respond to the first point, the first specific point, where Mohammed Hijab is quoted as saying, the reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. Just to make sure that nobody missed it, the Western Standard actually repeated this in print, in quotes. The reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. In other words, according to the Western Standard, according to Israel Now, Mohammed Hijab does not politically contextualize conflicts between Muslims and non-Muslims. It's not about, let's say, America being aggressive or belligerent, or any other Christian or Jewish political power being belligerent towards the Muslims. No, it's not about that. You should fight and kill the Jews because they are Jews. You should fight and kill the Christians because they are Christians. This is the view that is being imposed, that is being attributed to Mohammed Hijab. But what does he actually say? Well, I found the original complete video from which this clip was cut and pasted or spliced. And let's have a look at that video together to see what Mohammed Hijab is saying in context.
If they're saying that it's because they're, this is what they actually say. This is what we hear. They say the reason why you have to fight them is because they are Jews and Christians. So we say, but that's not what the ayah says.
So folks, as you can see from the context there, this is, it's unbelievable. In the context, Mohammed Hijab is saying that, what would you say if you heard someone make this allegation against Islam? Because this is what we hear. This is what we hear. What would you say if you heard from them and they said that Muslims are supposed to fight Jews and Christians because they are Jews and Christians? Mohammed Hijab is not making an affirmative statement here that we should fight Jews and Christians because they're Jews and Christians. So that very important part about what would you say if they said to you, that whole part has been spliced, it's been cut off. This just shows you how dirty the opposite side is willing to be, how low they're willing to go in order to misrepresent Muslim speakers. And then they present this evidence to the mayor of Burlington, to Canadian politicians, to the Canadian public. Look, here's a Muslim speaker saying you should fight Jews because they're Jews. Here's a Muslim speaker saying you should fight Christians because they're Christians. No, he's saying the very opposite. He's saying, how should we Muslims respond if we hear people make these allegations against Islam? And if you continue to watch that video, you'll see that he's encouraging his students who are there in front of him to respond to that point. And they bring up very interesting points, right? Like one of them says, well, we Muslims are allowed to marry Jewish women. We're allowed to marry Christian women. So like, Am I supposed to marry her and then fight her and kill her? How does that work? That wouldn't make any sense, right? But regardless of the responses or the explanations that are given, the point is that Mohammed Hijab has completely been taken out of context. Mir Weinstein of Israel Now, or whoever originally produced that clip, purposely cut off the first half in order to mislead you, the Canadian public. You're the victims, right? It's not just Muslims. The Canadian public is being misinformed. Canadian politicians are being misinformed. The mayor of Burlington is being misinformed. Look, here's the guy who's coming to speak in your city. And for anyone who wants to see the original context, who thinks that I haven't, provided enough of the context, the original video for this, the complete video for this, for those of you who are fair-minded, who are not lazy, who do want to look at the proper context of it, is on YouTube. It's called Shubuhat Series Number 1. Does Islam Allow the Killing of Innocent People? By Mohammed Hijab. And the exact timestamp would be 21 minutes and 58 seconds. Check it out for yourself. Do your own research. Don't be lazy. Don't just watch a cut and pasted, spliced up video of someone and determine from that, oh, this guy's a bad guy. This is not a fair way to assess things. Go and watch the video for yourself. We've provided you with the link, right? We're not hiding anything. The entire video is there for you to watch. Now let's look at the second allegation, the second wrong statement that is being attributed to Mohammed Hijab.
Truth. Your religion has to have an expansionist element. So then therefore there is no situation or conceivability of peace being made between Muslims and non-Muslims.
Again, this original video was removed from the website, but it's still very clearly in the print, in the print of the news article. Here it says, your religion has to have an expansionist element, he said in a different clip. Therefore, there is no situation or conceivability of peace being made between Muslims and non-Muslims. So again, the pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, anti-Islam crowd is sending out these kinds of video clips, selective, spliced up video clips to Canadian politicians, to the Canadian public, to people in little towns in Alberta who have never met Muslims. And the impression that they would have, right, is that, oh, here's a Muslim speaker coming to Burlington. He's going to be speaking in our country. He's going to be speaking in Canada. And he's saying there's no situation in which there can be peace between Muslims and Jews and Christians. There's no conceivability of peace between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. Again, I found the original complete video, which is there on YouTube for you to watch. And let's watch the relevant clip together to see what the proper, fuller context of that statement actually was. You might be very surprised.
Now, if someone says, well, if your religion has to have an expansionist element, so then therefore there is no situation or conceivability of peace being made between Muslims and non-Muslims, how would you respond, Mahdi, to that?
Once again, Mohammed Hijab is throwing out these questions as examples of allegations that are made by the anti-Islam camp. What would you say if they asked you? This is what we hear from the other side. The other side says, they question us and they say that if Islam is expansionist, if Islam wants to spread, if Islam wants to grow, well then how can there ever be any peaceful conditions between Muslims and Jews and Christians? Mohammed Hijab is not making this as an affirmative statement. Mohammed Hijab is not stating or affirming that there is no situation in which there can be peace between Muslims, Jews, and Christians. He's saying this is the allegation being made against Islam. This is the allegation being made against Muslims. Now, how do you respond to it? Again, this shows you how dirty the other side is willing to play, how low they're willing to stoop in order to misguide and fool the Canadian public. They must be getting very desperate to try to maintain support for Israel, right? To try to maintain that momentum, feeling bad feelings against Islam and Muslims, that they have to stoop to these kinds of low levels. I mean, the Western standard, This violates even basic professional ethics of journalism. When someone like Mir Weinstein sends you a video, or you discover this video on Mir Weinstein's Twitter account, and it's obviously spliced up, you can obviously see that just different clips have been pasted without context. Why would you, as a professional media outlet, as a professional newspaper, why would you just run with that and not try to verify what the proper context is? Like, do you not realize that this is slander against Mohammed Hijab? You are accusing him of holding extremist viewpoints that he doesn't hold. He might hold other views that you don't like. He might hold other views that you consider to be extreme. But here you are accusing him of extremist and, in fact, criminal kind of viewpoints, right? Viewpoints that would go against the laws of the countries that we live in. And you're using like fake clips to try to prove that. How low are you willing to stoop? The name of the original video is called Jihad by Mohammed Hijab, and the timestamp is 12 minutes and 25 seconds. Again, we're not hiding anything. It's all there. Please look at the complete context. Please go and see whether Mohammed Hijab is actually saying that there's no situation in which there can be peace between Muslims and Jews and Christians. And then finally, I'm going to use one more example of a false allegation that's being made against Mohammed Hijab, because, of course, you know, once you accuse somebody of pedophilia, or once you accuse someone of trying to justify pedophilia, that is kind of the worst mudslinging that you can do, right? Like, that is the worst you can make a person look, is to accuse them of being a child abuser or enabling child abuse or something like this. So from Mir Weinstein's Twitter account, or X account, Israel Now, here's a video that he still has up, which he has reposted, I believe, from Apostate Prophet, who is an ex-Muslim on YouTube, many of you would know about. And this video is being used to try to show that Mohammed Hijab is justifying pedophilia, more specifically, sex with pre-pubescent girls. I repeat, this clip is being used to scare people and to try to show that Mohammed Hijab is endorsing sex between men and pre-pubescent girls, girls who have not yet reached puberty. So first, let's see the clip, the spliced up, misrepresented clip that Mir Weinstein has on his Israel Now account on X.
If you look just at the Quran, you will get the indication that you can have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old. The reason why it's haram to have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old is not found in the Quran at all. If you just read the Quran, it is halal, it would be halal to have sexual intercourse with a 5-year-old. Chapter 65, verse 4. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us who you can divorce and who you cannot divorce. And then he says, وَاللَّائِ لَمْ يَحِدْنَ وَاللَّائِ لَمْ يَحِدْنَ, and the ones who had never been pubescent before. And by the way, this is very important, yeah? I want all Muslims to be aware of this. The reason why we don't have sexual intercourse with 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds or whatever is not because of puberty. Wait a minute, what did you say? It's not because of puberty, because that verse in the Quran actually says لَمْ يَحِدْنَ. They never had puberty before. You can't go around that. The Quran doesn't say anywhere in the Quran that the woman has to be pubescent. I dare you to find one verse in the Quran where it says you're not allowed to marry someone based on harm, or you're not allowed to have sexual intercourse based on harm, or you're not allowed to marry someone based on puberty. Get me one verse in the Quran which says the woman has to be pubescent. No. You know, in the Quran it says حُرِّمَتْ عَلَيْكُمْ أُمَّهَاتُكُمْ. It says you're not allowed to marry your mum. It says you're not allowed to marry your sister, your auntie. Where does it say you're not allowed to marry a pre-pubescent? I'm looking for one verse that you can say, you pinpoint it and say this is where it says pre-pubescent marriage or whatever is not allowed. So if you're Quran alone, you're steered towards pedophilia, and a severe type of pedophilia, a wife abuse, a severe type of wife abuse.
But when we say it, we are Islamophobic. Stay away from Islam.
Again, our team found the original video from which this little clip was unfairly taken. The original video is called The Extreme Consequences of Believing Quran Only. And the timestamp you want to go to is 8 minutes and 8 seconds. Let's watch that fuller clip from that complete video now.
I've just said the criteria for why we're not allowed to marry pre-pubescent, or let's say women that can't deal with it, is harm. That comes from the Sunnah. Now, the only verse in the Quran is وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. Don't cause your own harm to your own self. But it doesn't say anything about causing harm to others. I'm looking for one verse in the Quran.
That's talking jihad though.
وَلَا تُلْقُوا بِأَيْدِيكُمْ إِلَى التَّهْلُكَةِ. I'm looking for one verse that you can say, you pinpoint it and say this is where it says pre-pubescent marriage or whatever is not allowed. It's only found in the Sunnah. It's only found in the Sunnah.
So again, folks, you can see that Mohammed Hijab, his point in this video was he was debating someone who claims to be a Muslim and who follows only the Quran. He doesn't follow the Sunnah, the sayings and the practices of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. He follows only the Quran. So Mohammed Hijab was trying to show him the flaw in his thinking, the fallacy in his thinking. He was saying, look, if you went by the Quran only, then you wouldn't know, right? You wouldn't know from the Quran itself directly that it's haram, it's prohibited to have any kind of injurious sex with anybody, any kind of sex that would be injurious or oppressive, including sex with prepubescent girls. In order to have scriptural evidence for that position, you have to go to the Sunnah. You have to go to the Hadiths. From the Hadiths, you would know that you can't have sex with prepubescent girls because that can cause injury, that can be oppressive. So why did the clip that Mir Weinstein put up on his Israel Now account, why did they cut that part off? You know, look, this would be like me saying, now this is just an example, this would be like me saying that there's no federal legislation in Canada that prohibits me from discriminating against the LGBTQ community. I said there's no federal legislation. Or if I said, I challenge you to show me where in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms the rights of the LGBTQ community are protected, right? So I would have a point. I would be technically correct, because the follow-up to that is that there's provincial legislation that does specify protections for the LGBT community. We might have to go to the Ontario Human Rights Code for that, because the laws that we follow in Canada is not only federal legislation. We're also following provincial legislation. We're also following municipal laws and bylaws, right? So similarly, Islam is not only the Quran. That was the real point of Mohammed Hijab. Islam is not just from the Quran. It also includes the Sunnah, the Hadiths, the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And there are other sources of the Sharia as well, in addition to that. Mohammed Hijab's point was not that it's okay to go have sex with a 3, 4, or 5-year-old. His point was that if as a Muslim you want scriptural, technical, legal evidence that it's wrong to have sex with a 3 or 5-year-old, then the Quran will not be sufficient for you. You'll be forced to have to go to the Sunnah of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and that's where you're going to get the complete picture from. That was his point. Folks, in the end, I want to repeat, you don't have to be a fan of Mohammed Hijab. I don't have to like Mohammed Hijab, but in a spirit of fairness and objectivity, we have to acknowledge that there are pro-Zionist, anti-freedom of speech forces, right, ironically, that are at work in Canada, that are resorting to fear-mongering and scaremongering, and they are trying to pressure and cancel not just Mohammed Hijab, any Muslim event that's happening. You can go on Mir Weinstein's Twitter account where he's bad-mouthing the RIS conference, the Reviving the Islamic Spirit conference in Canada. That's about as moderate of a conference as you can get. That's about the most moderate Islamic conference that you can get. And they will accuse them of being rabid anti-Semites and all of this. It's all hot air. It's really all hot air. So if you're just a regular Canadian who's not a Muslim, who's not even concerned with these kinds of things, please just keep your mind open and keep your heart open. Understand that there's always two sides of the story. By slandering Mohammed Hijab, you're not just slandering Mohammed Hijab, like you are slandering a large chunk of the Canadian Muslim community. You're saying that we are happy to invite and attend events by people who say, oh, you should fight and kill Jews because they're Jews. Oh, you should fight and kill Christians because they're Christians. You should have sex with a 5-year-old. You should break Canadian laws, right? I mean, you're slandering a large chunk of the Muslim community. So that would be my message to just kind of regular mainstream Canadians. And to Canadian Muslims, my message would be, this is not the time for sectarianism. This really is the time to unite. If you think that they're just coming for Mohammed Hijab, they're not. They're going to come for your speaker next. They're going to come for your event next. They're going to come for your conference next. Because this didn't start with this upcoming I3 conference. This started with the Hizb ut-Tahrir Canada conference, which was scheduled for, I believe, January 18th. And because of social media buzz by this anti-Islam, anti-Muslim group of people, they pressured Hizb ut-Tahrir Canada into canceling that event. So now they kind of feel on a roll. Because you see, this is something I really want Canadian Muslims to understand. When you give in to the bully doesn't go away. When you let the bully push you, the bully doesn't go away. He comes back next week and he'll beat you up even more. So you have to stand strong. You have to stand with your principles. The masajid, the imams, the committees of these masajid have to stand strong and say that this speaker has not violated any law of Canada. So on what basis are you harassing us? On what basis are you pressuring us? Why are you violating our freedom of speech if we haven't violated the laws of the country? So whether you like Mohammed Hijab or not, whether you like the I3 Institute or not, whether you like me or not, whether you think my beard or my hat looks funny or not, it's irrelevant. If you are a fair-minded person, if you're an objective person, then look at the statements of Mohammed Hijab in context and understand that this is a case study. This is not just about Mohammed Hijab. This is a case study in how the Western media and social media misrepresent and in fact slander Muslim speakers and Muslim organizations time and time again. If you are truly a fair-minded person, if you are a person of justice, not should you just desist from spreading this kind of false propaganda against Mohammed Hijab and other Muslim speakers. That's not enough. If you're a person of justice, you should be writing a complaint letter right now to the Western Standard. You should say, look, I'm right-wing, I'm conservative, I otherwise support you guys, but this kind of thing is wrong. This is lying about the enemy. And we don't want to lie about the enemy. If the enemy is as evil as we think he is, we shouldn't have to invent lies against him. If you're a person of justice, it's not just enough to shake your head and say, yeah, maybe this time they did misrepresent Muslims. No, you should write to Mir Weinstein. You should message Israel Now. You should message Mir Weinstein on X and say, what is this about? Why were you retweeting or reposting these kinds of videos, which you can see that it's been cut and spliced up and it's misrepresenting the views of this Muslim speaker. That's not how we want to operate. With that, folks, I think that's everything that needed to be said. Thank you for watching the video till the very end. Please share this with your friends, acquaintances, and colleagues, as well as your local MPs, Canadian politicians, because this is relevant not just for this particular event, but as a case study for many future events and future visiting Muslim speakers to Canada. Jazakumullah khairan. Take care, brothers and sisters. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.